Hi, everyone. So I've always been fascinated with the unseen. And with that, I mean the microbial world. And more specifically, microbes that inhabit our aquatic ecosystem. So I would just like to give you a little bit of a comparison and why I'm so interested in them. My favorite aquatic microbe is called Synechococcus. In 1 drop of seawater, you have about 2,000 cells. Just to give you a rough calculation, that means that its mean global abundance is 7×10⁻26 cells. That number is very hard to comprehend. So let's put it into perspective. That's the number of estimated emails per year. That's the number of bacteria in the human gut. And that's the number of stars in the universe. So there are more Synechococcus on Earth than the number of stars in the universe. And that's just only one genus of bacteria. So with such a high abundance and wide distribution, I personally seek out to understand them better. And that leads me to a different story for today's story, and I did not end well. But this is how it started. We have 20 flu-like deaths in Pennsylvania, 115 ill, a mystery. That's the 1976 Philadelphia Legionnaires' disease outbreak among legionnaires at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel. And many began suffering a mysterious form of pneumonia. The total number of cases reached out 221, and of those, 34 had died. That's an actual X-ray picture from one of the patients of the original outbreak in Philly. It's an underpenetrated radiograph with diffuse infiltrates, and that's consistent with pneumonia. And it was later determined, through a lot of hard work and persistence, that the cause of the disease was Legionella pneumophila. So what I would like to do next with you is to follow that patient, take you on a journey to try to understand more about the disease, the bacteria responsible for it, but also how to develop lab capacity and testing, and then also how to potentially prevent more cases from occurring. So as I mentioned, a bacteria of the genus Legionella causes Legionnaire's disease. It has received a lot of attention lately. It's a growing public health concern. There has been many calls for cases. We all get the APX emails, and several large high-profile outbreaks recently. The incidence of the disease also nearly quadrupled since 2000, and there was about 6,000 cases in 2015. So those are some plates and pictures that I took besides the beautiful one that was in me. There's more than 60 different species of Legionella, including some that fluorescence. They're really difficult to grow. They're slow growers. They like it hot. They like humidity, special media, CO2, and they're also sometimes associated with amoebas or protozoan. On a higher level of detail, they look like ground glass, and they're extremely beautiful. I'm really fascinated by them. They're a little sticky when you try to pick them. They have defined edges. They can be pink, blue, purple, or green. So let's start our journey. Legionella is commonly found in freshwater, and that's its natural habitat. However, in freshwater, it's not in amounts high enough to cause any disease. And it only becomes a health concern when it's spread to the built environment, such as hospitals, hotels, and cruises, and when it multiplies in things like shower, cooling towers, spas, and decorative fountains. So how do we sample for Legionella, and how do we find it? So here we have one of New York City's open reservoirs, which is the last stop before the water enters the filtration plant and reaches the distribution system. That picture was taken when I went on a sampling run at the end of January. And here you don't have any faucet, or you don't have any tap water to sample it. So what do? You use something called a Daan Sampler. And what you do is that you lower it in the water, so you kind of hang above the reservoir. You lower it. You see it's open on both sides. When it reaches the desired depth, you trigger it. That's the word for it. It closes both extremities, and then you just bring it back up. Although in this case, if you remember the picture, the reservoir was frozen, I was frozen, we could not sample it. But then we followed that reservoir, and then we ended up in the busy streets of the Bronx. And that's a sampling station. So there are many gray boxes in New York. Well, now you know what's inside of them. There's 965 of them. And there are 1,300 samples that are collected every month. Water samples that we check for bacteria, chlorine level, pH, and many other water quality indicators. And so the way it works is that you let the water run through in a tube down on the ground in the city, in the street, and then you just collect it and bring your sample back home. So something that I really like when we went out sampling is that people will come to you and ask you, what were you doing? But in a very genuine and interesting way. And when we told them we were sampling and testing the water, they were actually very happy about it, which is a good thing. Nobody, we didn't get assaulted. So there we just look at 2 potential potable water sources for Legionella. But how about the non-potable water? So I had the opportunity to go on a cooling tower investigation and inspection. So I didn't have a cool NYC badge to flash at the reception of the palace we went to, but they still let me go up and sample and help with the investigation. So we went up the 50th floor of a building of the hotel to encounter those gigantic devices. Those are pictures of the cooling towers on top of the hotel. So what they are is a giant heat exchanger that contains water and that used to remove excess heat from the building as far as air conditioning, heating system, or ventilation. It also creates a mist and it evaporates, and that mist could potentially contain Legionella and could potentially make people sick. Inside of the cooling tower is also water, and the water is heated, which is a great environment for any type of bacteria, including Legionella. So yes, you do have to go up this unpleasant ladder, which is very hard to go up with, and coming back down, I think, is even harder. You walk around the structure, you open a little trap door, and then you go in, and you kind of throw yourself inside, and you sample it. So there are more than 6,000 cooling towers in New York City, and teams from the public health engineering go out every day on cooling tower inspections. So why do we do that? So there's a reason why all of New York City's cooling towers are being inspected. During the summer of 2015, there was a Legionella disease outbreak that occurred in the South Bronx. And that was the 2nd largest outbreak of community-acquired Legionella disease in US history, with 138 cases and 16 deaths. During that time, 55 cooling towers were sampled in the affected area, and several of them tested positive for Legionella, and a few of them for Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1, which is about 80% of the disease. And one cooling tower in particular matched the isolate that were recovered from patients by whole genome sequencing. Now, in response to this outbreak, was implemented the cooling towers, and we call it the cooling tower law, and that was the first time in the US. And now building owners are required to register the cooling tower to have the main goal of decreasing the Legionella contamination in cooling towers to prevent outbreaks or eliminate them. So the algorithm that we use in the lab to be able to decide on doing an investigation or if a cooling tower is contaminated only takes 24 hours. And I think that's one of the great things about it. It's a PCR positive method. If your cooling tower is sample, we do extraction, PCR next day or the same day, and within 24 hours, you can actually do remediation. So now I will move out of snowy New York City and take you to Hawaii. So if you think about it and what we know about Legionella, Hawaii is a great, great place for it. It's hot, it's humid, has a lot of aging tourists, has a lot of hotels, spas, decorated fountain. The whole spas now, it's a big no-no for me. There's no more spas. After Legionella, it doesn't exist anymore. But not only the environment, but there's also an increase of disease incident and awareness about the disease, and that makes the general population in Hawaii, but also tourists and building owners to be more concerned about it, and they want Legionella testing. They're asking the public health departments about it, although very few cases have been recorded in the past couple of years in Hawaii. So I was very fortunate to lead a lab aid up until last week in Hawaii to building lab capacity at the Public Health Laboratory Division. And so they asked CDC for help to try to be able to detect and characterize Legionella and respond to an outbreak as quickly as New York City. and to be a step ahead of the disease in case an outbreak occurs. And so my goal when I was there was to mix in some CDC method, some New York City method, and New York State method to be able to create their own testing algorithm and their own response component from the lab side in case an outbreak occurs. And they're also interested in probably implementing surveillance for all the EIs who want to go to Hawaii. So developing lab capacity for Hawaii and for any type of lab capacity for Legionella is a challenge, because not only you need to think about the type of samples that you get, which would be potable water, non-potable water, or clinical, but it also depends on the techniques you're using. Culture is a very important step, and so are molecular techniques, but you also have commercially available kits. And then you have to think about your analysis and about your response. How are you going to respond to finding Legionella, for example? So as an exercise, we did some environmental sampling. But instead of the relaxing spa that I mentioned earlier, well, we tested more cooling towers. And those were actually a little bit up in the ground, so I had to get on top of an unstable ladder and go in and dive in and sample. Those cooling towers actually tested very much positive for Legionella pneumophila. And so it kind of shows that the concern that they have and the interest that they have is probably justified. So to sum up our Legionella journey, I would like to present a call for action. We have a disease on the rise. And I believe that for prevention and remediation, we need to increase our surveillance system. But that would mean that you need to increase sampling. And also, you need to be able to collect isolates. And from our dear clinicians, need to collect those isolates to be able to match the environmental sample with the cultures and with the patient information to link those two diseases. So we need to increase sampling. We also need to with increased sampling, you need to be able to have the laboratory be able to test in order to implement, therefore, a rapid response, just like New York City did. Thank you.